Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, December 17th, and we will be discussing The Boys from Brazil.
Okay.
Take it
Well,
away.
thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. And I hope you enjoyed it. It's a little different than some of the other things we've watched, and certainly different than what we've been watching lately. This is not Munich, this movie, The Boys from Brazil. It's from 1978. It was, may have noticed the producer's name at the beginning, Lou Grade. It's a Lou Grade production. Lou Grade was a British Jewish media mogul. And so I think he had an affinity for this. He was knighted by the Queen at some point, so he was Sir Lou Grade. But I don't think it said that at the beginning. I think he had not yet gotten his knighthood in 1978. But um, um, but he did a lot of things. Yeah, I like that picture of him. I don't know if he's dancing or what he's doing in the middle in the first row, but he
They
was
all have, he's got cigars in all of them.
right. I was just going to say that, like the old time Jewish movie producers, and production companies in Hollywood back in the 1930s and stuff like that, Lou Grade was kind of the natural inheritor of that kind of position in England, right? So Jews aren't only overrepresented in movies in America; they've been overrepresented in movies in other parts of the world as well. The director of this movie is not Jewish. His name is Franklin J. Schaffner, a pretty well-respected director who made a lot of different kinds of movies. He won an Oscar for Best Director for the movie Patton in 1971. So, so just a few years before this, he started out in the days of live TV, doing, Studio 90 and those kinds of things. So his reputation was that he worked quick, in budget. Those 90-minute TV shows that were done live to camera, back in the early 1950s, trained up a generation of directors um, to get it done, right? So it's in the 1970s with the guys like Francis Ford Coppola and even more Michael Cimino, who made The Deer Hunter, that you started to get these guys who go over budget and do 1,000 takes of a scene. Franklin J. Schaffner worked quick, and I think you may see some of that in this movie. So um, he also directed other movies that you've undoubtedly seen, including the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston, and Papillon with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, Nicholas and Alexandra about the last days of Tsar Nicholas II. Uh, his first uh, his first movie for his first movie for Hollywood for the big screen was a movie called The Best Man, based on play, I play or a novel by Gore Vidal. So he had a long and pretty distinguished career. The writer of the movie, not as well known, Haywood Gould, his name. He's the one who adapted the book that this movie is based on. Haywood Gould has never won an Oscar for screenwriting. He actually has won a Razzie, which is the opposite of an Oscar. You guys know about the Razzie Awards, right? For the movie Cocktail with Tom Cruise as a celebrity bartender, he won the Razzie for worst screenplay the year that came out. So not as well known as Franklin Schaffner. But the writer of the book is pretty well known, and a lot of his work was brought to Hollywood, and that's whose picture is up there now, Ira Levin. Um,
Oh,
Many of his books were adapted for movies. He did write some plays and screenplays himself, but he didn't write this one. He wrote the screenplay, well, first the stage play, which I think won a Tony, and then became a movie and is very funny, called No Time for Sergeants. I don't know if any of you remember that. I believe it's Andy Griffith and Don Knotts before Andy Griffith and Don Knotts were in the Andy Griffith Show together. So um, so Ira Levin wrote that play and screenplay, but he was better known probably for novels that became movies. Um, and
That's
I
not Don Knotts, but
not
it's
not the
Andy Griffith.
co-star, but I think Don Knotts is in that movie
Yeah.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to go back and see it shows on Turner Classic Movies every now and then. So
1958.
mhm. So you know, um, so there are a couple of really good Andy Griffith movies before he became the Andy Griffith of the Andy Griffith Show, Sheriff Taylor. So No Time for Sergeants. Even an even better movie is A Face in the Crowd. But okay, that's a real digression to go off on Andy Griffith from this movie. But Ira Levin wrote the novel uh, Rosemary's Baby, and he wrote the novel The Stepford Wives, both of which have became popular movies, and actually both of them have had kind of continuing lives. I mean, a remake of The Stepford Wives fairly recently, and kind of a um, sort of a prequel to Rosemary's Baby came out pretty recently too. Um, so, um, so, so definitely an interesting character, and he wrote this sort of in this wheel. This was sort of his wheelhouse, The Boys from Brazil, of kind of science fiction based on things that he saw starting to happen in the scientific world, right? So similar, Vanessa and I were talking yesterday on things similar to someone like Michael Crichton, who, took science and then brought it to kind of an extreme. So this is, I believe, before. Well, it's so early in the idea of cloning that the movie has to take time out to tell us what cloning is, right? Did you notice that there's actually a scene where let's bring in a scientist to explain cloning, right? So it's you know, nowadays, of course, you wouldn't have to do that because we've all read enough about it in the newspaper to at least have an understanding of what it is, right?
Dolly the sheep was cloned on July 5th, 1996.
Right.
So this
So
was ahead of its time.
yeah, right. So so cloning was theoretical when this came out in 1978, you know. Um, So, and it also, I think, the whole plot revolves on this sort of question in a way of nature versus nurture, right?
Mhm.
The Dr. Mengele in this movie, played by Gregory Peck, uh, casting against type, pretty much. I'm hard pressed to think of another movie where he's the bad guy, really. Um,
I read somewhere this is the only time.
yeah, yeah, I can't think of one. Sometimes maybe there's some shades of gray, but even that's not very common. Um, Gregory Peck, of course, won an Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird. He was nominated several times, including for the movie that we saw. I think it may have been the very first movie we showed in this series of real Jewish classics, Gentleman's Agreement from.
Oh, I love that movie.
Right. Well, you loved it when we showed it too. So so where he plays a character pretending to be Jewish in Gentleman's Agreement. If you don't remember it or didn't see it with us, I certainly encourage you to go back and take a look at that. One of the first Hollywood movies to mention the term anti-Semitism. So um, he also got Oscar nominations for let's see, I think three other movies besides the two that we mentioned: Western 12 O'clock High, The Yearling, and Keys of the Kingdom. Of course, it was in many other movies over the years, but those are the ones recognized with Oscar nominations. Um, Laurence Olivier got an Oscar nomination for this movie. I say I think Olivier is considerably better in a lot of other movies than he is in this one. I didn't look up to see who he was up against that year, but uh, it 2 years later, he's nominated for the movie that we're going to watch for next week, Marathon Man. And uh, and I think without giving any spoilers away, I can say that the character he plays in this movie and the character he plays in Marathon Man are opposites, right? So in this movie, he plays a version of Simon Wiesenthal, the Nazi hunter, and in Marathon Man, he plays a hidden Nazi. So, um,
That's
so
Simon Wiesenthal.
right, but so he did get an Oscar nomination for this movie. He gets nominated again 2 years later for Marathon Man. He
Hmm.
was nominated many times in his life. I think he only won once, but he was nominated for Sleuth, for Othello, for a movie called The Entertainer, which is also quite good and shows up on Turner Classic Movies now and then for his Shakespeare movies, Richard III, Henry V, and Hamlet, where he was nominated both as actor and director, and I think won the Oscar that
He
year.
won in 1946 for Henry V.
Oh, Henry V. Okay,
Yeah. Um, oh no, wait, nominated.
yeah,
He has so many awards.
right.
Wuthering
Uh,
Heights and Rebecca, he was nominated.
that's right. I was just going to get to those. Those were his first Oscar nominations. So he's one of those guys, sort of like Peter O'Toole, who's nominated a lot. I think he got a special Oscar at some point in his life. I think maybe he won one, but I'm not positive about that.
He won for Hamlet in 49.
That's what I thought. Okay. Did he win Oscar and actor and
No,
director that year? He was
no,
nominated for both.
yes, but he only won for actor.
Okay. So, um, so anyway, so Laurence Olivier, Gregory Peck, the third of the trio of well-known stars in this movie at the time is James Mason, who has a much smaller role in this movie, but was nominated for a handful of Oscars himself over the years, including back to the 1950s when he was nominated for A Star Is Born, the one with uh, oh my gosh,
Oh,
the
oh, it was
1954
Judy
Judy Garland.
Garland.
with Judy
Judy
Garland.
Garland.
And all I could think of was Liza Minnelli in the moment. So, but that's what happens sometimes. So, A Star Is Born. He was nominated for that, playing Norman Maine. He was nominated for his role in Georgie Girl in the 1960s, and he was nominated for the movie he made with Paul Newman, The Verdict, which I think is maybe the early 80s, I want to say. Uh,
Yeah.
so a long career in Hollywood. Things and well known in other things. Some of you may remember him for North by Northwest, the
Oh, I love that movie.
where he plays the bad guy. And he's in Lolita, one of Stanley Kubrick's early movies. Um, uh, you know, so a really good leading actor and character actor. So I personally, I think all three of these actors did better work in other movies. I mean, I think some of that is that speed I was talking about Franklin J. Schaffner. Um, that he may not have given them the chance to get as deep into it as some other director might have done with this work. But it's fascinating to see all three of them on the screen, So in the same movie, any one of them would be enough to carry a plot. So, but by 1978, in a certain sense, they were all in various stages of the last stages of their careers, right? Although James Mason died in 1984, Laurence Olivier died in 1989, Gregory Peck was a little younger than those two, but not that much, 10 years younger. He lived to 2003. right? So, and all of them had laid in their careers some pretty big hits. As I mentioned, The Verdict, which had a lot of Oscar nominations that year for James Mason. Um, Gregory Peck, uh, pretty fairly late in his career, not that long after this. I think The Omen came out, which was a huge hit that he was in. Laurence Olivier, I'm not thinking about what his last, already Marathon Man. I mean that, we're already getting fairly close to the end, but he still made several more movies after this, and charming movie I think that comes after this is A Little Romance, if memory serves, that he's in. Um, so just a couple other names, Jerry Goldsmith. So none of those lead actors are Jewish, by the way. As I said, neither is Franklin J. Schaffner nor Haywood Gould. Ira Levin, yes. Jerry Goldsmith, who wrote the score and was nominated for the Oscar for Best Score for this movie, has a whole slew of Oscar nominations for score. Won several, including for The Omen, and many others over the years. And he did the score for Patton, so he'd worked with Franklin J. Schaffner before this. But everything from uh, A Patch of Blue, Papillon, Chinatown, The Wind and the Lion, Planet of the Apes, another Schaffner movie, right? The Sand Pebbles, Poltergeist, Under Fire, Hoosiers, Basic Instinct, LA Confidential, and I think his last film score nomination and credit is Mulan, the Disney movie. So, yeah, Babs?
How about John Rubinstein?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to him yet.
I recognized him. I don't know from where, but I
No.
recognized him.
So he's been in a lot of things over the years. I mean, he is the son of Arthur Rubinstein, the great pianist. Actually, I saw him in 1972, I think, with my parents in New York City in the original cast of Pippin on
Hmm.
Broadway. He plays the title role in Pippin, and um, later on in his stage career, he won a Tony for his performance in Children of a Lesser God on Broadway. So he's been around. He's if you look at his list of credits on IMDb, you don't necessarily say, "Oh, yeah, I know him from this. I know him from that." He's played a doctor, and I don't know how many shows on TV he's played a doctor in, over the years. I don't know, is that typecasting? What is that? But an interesting uh, actor, not a huge part in this, but at a time when, Pippin was 1972. I don't know when Children of a Lesser God was. I think that's later, 80s probably. But, so a well-respected character actor, I think, right? And so, and this was at the height of it. A guy who's just beginning his career in this movie is Steve Guttenberg, who shows up in the early scenes in the movie before he's killed by Dr. Mengele, right? But this is very early in his career, and his role as an actor in comedies is not really cemented yet by this time. But he was, just a few years later, he's in a movie that we could watch sometime actually for this class. He's in the first Barry Levinson movie, Diner.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Right. That's when I first noticed him actually was in that movie. But then he went on and he made those police academy comedies.
Yeah.
He was one of the stars of Three Men and a Baby with Ted Danson and Magnum PI, that guy. Uh, and also in the movie Cocoon.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and in recent years has been, after making probably a ton of money on these rather silly police academy movies, has sort of started to reappear in character parts, rather than leading man roles. And so you're starting to see him reappear. Um, so so it's and nice to see him back. I mean, he got sort of a bad rep, I think, for the silliness of those police academy roles. Sometimes you can't turn down the paycheck. Um, Jim Carrey's doing one of those right now. He's in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. After saying he was retiring from show business, he couldn't turn down the check they offered him. Um, so let's see. Other folks who, there's a ton of people whose faces you recognize in this movie, right? Ann Mira from Stiller and Mira shows up, right? Um, outside of the comedy duo that she had with Jerry Stiller, she was an accomplished actress in her own right. She's nominated for a few Emmys, one for the very serious TV series Homicide, where she played something completely straight. One for the comedy that succeeded All in the Family, Archie Bunker's Place, with Carol O'Connor, and I think for a series that she um, was the lead actress in called Kate McShane. Didn't last very long, but um, so it's very serious, very good career, and has a role in this as one of the mothers, right? Um, you may have recognized Uta Hagen, who is better known as an acting teacher than as an actress herself. She plays the sister of the um,
Laurence Olivier.
Laurence Olivier's character. Yes. So, um,
Herr Lieberman.
right. So she's whatever her first name is, Lieberman in this movie. So, but she became very well respected acting coach in New York. She won Tonys for a play called The Country Girl, and she originated the role in the lead role in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Uh, so before it became a movie in Hollywood with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. So, um, and she was born in Germany, not Jewish, came to America and grew up in Wisconsin, went to the University of Wisconsin, actually, for a period of time in Madison. So, uh, Lily Palmer is a Jewish actress who appears in this movie. And I think she was in The Diary of Anne Frank, playing Anne Frank's mom, if memory serves. Maybe not in the movie, maybe on stage. Uh, so, and other folks who show up in this, Rosemary Harris, who won a Tony for A Lion in Winter. She's maybe she had an Oscar nomination for a movie in 1995, Tom and Viv, about I believe that was about T.S. Eliot and his first wife. Um, she had an Emmy nomination for a lead actress in Holocaust, right, the 1978. So around the same time as this movie, the mini series called Holocaust. Um, Most recently, she's probably best known as playing Aunt May in the Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man trilogy from a few
Oh,
years.
there you go.
Um, so, um, so she's been in a lot of things as well. Did I leave anybody out? Oh, Denholm Elliott. Uh, I've almost forgotten what he does. He's a journalist, right? In this movie, he's the one who's looking. He's a connection that Laurence Olivier has, and is helping him look up the names of that are on this hit list, right? So We've seen him in The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz in our class, if you can remember back to that movie where he plays the alcoholic movie director who ends up filming the Bar Mitzvah movie in The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. Very accomplished character actor. You've seen him in a lot of things, including A Room with a View and Trading Places, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So he was in a ton of things over the years. Um, he uh, he actually was a British prisoner of war during World War II. He was captured by the Germans and spent time in a German prison camp during World War II. Um, so, so an interesting backstory, but not a Jewish actor. Right? So those are the folks who made this movie, who star in this movie. It's a pretty star-studded cast for, we talked about, even for Steven Spielberg making Munich, he didn't really expect Munich to make money. This was not making Munich is not a money-making potential sort of movie. This was, right? This was intended to be a blockbuster, a Hollywood, starring big stars and from top to bottom, people you've heard of all the way down into the small casting decisions, right? So this is the sort of cast you might see in remember some of those the disaster movies of the 1970s, right? The Poseidon Adventure and Airport, not Airplane, that's different. That's the parody of those movies, but where let's trot out Helen Hayes on the airplane and Airport, stuff like that, right? So
Earthquake, The Towering
right,
Inferno,
yeah, exactly.
Airport.
But so this is not quite those, in that sense. But the idea is let's put some big stars who everybody's heard of into a movie, and people will go to see it, right? So this movie was intended to make money. I believe it made money. I know, it wasn't Raiders of the Lost Ark or anything like that, but it did okay. So it is uh, a movie about the Holocaust hidden in a science fiction movie in a certain sense, right? So, and again, we were talking about this a little bit of this last week, that you don't have to make movies that prove the Holocaust actually happened when you're showing it to a generation of people who know that the Holocaust happened, right? So they don't really need a verisimilitude. They don't really need, um, to prove anything, right? They go to a greater length to prove the possibility of cloning than they do to talk about anything about the history of the Holocaust, right? And there is, I think, an assumption that this movie makes that everybody knows that there are Nazis hiding out in South America, right? There's no, they don't have to prove that. It's just there. Whether there ever were Nazis hiding out in South America as blatantly as these, I don't know. Maybe some of you know better than I do whether there were actually like, you know, parties with Nazi flags and people in uniform and stuff happening in South America. Uh, you know, it, a generation, less than a generation after World War II. I don't know. Uh, I mean, I know they happen now places, so I guess it's not impossible. Susan, I see you. Are you waving your
Yeah,
hand? Yeah.
from what I can
You have some
remember,
German
Rabbi,
experience, actually, right?
can you hear me?
Yes.
From what I can remember, and we have some very good friends from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and from what I know, yes, there were a lot of Nazis that went to South America, but most of them were living in hiding.
Right.
They had taken on assumed names and
Mhm.
pretending to be something that they weren't because they were afraid of being caught.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding of that experience as well.
Yeah.
But perhaps there were some pockets and some places where some things like, but we had a guy run for Congress in Illinois a few years ago who was on his Facebook page in a Nazi uniform, right, as a Nazi sympathizer. Right? He lost, thank goodness. But he did get 30% of the vote because there was an R next to his name, in the district, in a heavily Democratic district that he ran in. So it didn't seem to trouble anybody. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Elaine?
yeah.
Yeah, we were in a small town in Argentina. It looked very German, and they told us the Germans lived there. And we always felt that that's where the Nazis had ended up, called Bariloche, in the
Yeah.
mountains outside of Argentina somewheres.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they were there.
Part of there's a peculiar logic here that part of the reason that Nazis fled to Argentina is that their immigration laws were less restrictive than a lot of countries. And Jews found their way to Argentina in the 30s, right? Because my own brother-in-law, Enrique, his family, the Neufelds, moved from Germany in 1934 to get away from Hitler and moved to Argentina because they couldn't get into America, right? So there were a lot of German Jewish families living in Argentina. And in a certain sense, that was cover for these Nazis who, after the war, went there, took on names that maybe sounded more or less Jewish, and tried to blend in a little bit, right? So, um, so, um, so, it's sort of this weird kind of thing that you end up with former Nazis living next to former Jewish, still Jews, but former German Jewish, immigrants, right?
I always thought Juan Perón had been a friend of Hitler and helped them get there.
Yeah.
Had you heard that?
I don't know that for sure. I mean, but yeah, uh, in much the same way, was that this group where we were talking about Werner von Braun coming to America and building our rocket program, right?
Yes. Why
Oh,
were we
yeah.
talking about that?
Yeah.
Bringing in, somebody, you know, doctors and judges and things like that. I mean, they were kind of welcome, you know. So that's but it's a very peculiar sort of historical thing that because the laws were a little bit open, Nazis could go there, right? They didn't have sedition laws and things like that that made it a bit more difficult for ex-Nazis to come to America. Although there certainly were some who got here as well, as Simon Wiesenthal, among others, other Nazi hunters have tracked them down in various parts of the United States at times. So, but the way that this movie portrays it as being so sort of out in the open in Paraguay, I can't verify that as anything factual, but remember the movie opens up with a Heidelberg beer garden in Paraguay, right? They're celebrating Oktoberfest in Paraguay. Uh, so, um, and that's the beginning of the movie, this weird sort of juxtaposition of kind of German culture and South American culture. See a bullfight going on at the same time that there's an Oktoberfest, those kinds of things. So it's a pretty odd juxtaposition that I think you know and again, I'm not sure it's created entirely for the movie. I mean, I think um, there are German beer gardens. I'm sure, there's German restaurants and beer gardens here in Chicago, and that long predate the war, right? The same in Milwaukee, where I lived before I moved down here. So it's um, not impossible to find a German beer garden next to a bullfight, right, in Paraguay. So. Um, but that said, the movie gets to be a science fiction movie pretty quickly as it moves along. In the credits, I think it mentions introducing Jeremy Black. I don't think Jeremy Black really his career did not take off after this, but he plays the miniature Hitlers,
Oh,
wherever these guys go, right?
yeah.
The door is opened by a kid who looks exactly the same with crazy blue eyes, right? So um, so he is creepily effective in this movie. I would say I think it's a good job, but it was not a ticket to stardom by any means for him. Maybe because he was so creepily effective, right? That once you've been this in a movie, maybe you're not allowed to be like the nice boy next door in a romance or something like that. So he made such an impact in the scenes that he's in, where in each and every one of them he does appear to be well on his road to being a psychopath. No, so the movie has some interesting things to say about sort of nature and nurture in that sense too, and that's the plot uh, that Mengele has created here is that he needs both. He wants nature and nurture, right? So you start with cloning Hitler, but then you also have to make sure that Hitler's father dies when the boy is a certain age, he has a certain kind of mother, right? So all with the hopes that he can create a new leader, and doing it. I think they say how many people have to die? 94. 94 men must die on or near certain dates, right? So that they should all die around the time this child turns the age that Hitler turned when his father was out of the picture, right? Um, so all of these fathers have to have younger wives. They all have to turn 65, and the gradually the plot is revealed as the movie goes on, and so there is an element, a kind of a Hitchcockian element to this of slowly the plot comes into focus, and so when you see that child repeated in these three places that we see him, that's when you start to get a sense of what's really going on here. So um,
I remember when it came out, but
uh,
I just can't imagine what the general movie-going public, because who knew about cloning? I mean, maybe they just thought, oh, this is a far-fetched science fiction. Uh,
yeah,
Now it's like, oh yeah, cloning.
right, right, yeah. It seemed more futuristic, I guess, in its time. But it's not that people weren't concerned about the idea of cloning. I mean, that's, the movie talks about it, right? You could clone a great musician or a
Right.
great artist, you know. But no, of course, the first experiment in human cloning, yeah, Hitler, right? So
Sue,
yeah,
wait, I'll unmute you.
Um, so I was looking at this, as we all know that Joseph Mengele did he did experiment
sure.
all kinds of horrible things to children, to homosexuals, to whatever.
Twin
And
studies.
we know that those things happened for sure. And I felt like this was an exaggeration of
Right.
that. It
Yeah.
it took
Well,
it
most particularly,
it took
Sue,
it 10
his
steps further than what it really had been.
right. Most particularly, Sue, he did some horrific things with identical twins,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And that plays into this movie plot in a certain sense.
right.
I mean,
And as a grandmother of identical twins,
yeah,
that really
yeah,
gives me the willies.
yeah. One of my closest friends, his mother was a surviving twin, so from Dr. Mengele.
Oh,
She was
Awful.
obviously had a horrific effect on her life, even though she was lucky to be the survivor,
And, and even though I felt like Gregory Peck, for the wonderful actor that he really made you hate him in this movie.
Yeah,
He does a wonderful job, even though in all the other movies we've seen him in, we like him.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this one, oh my goodness, he was hateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like the deck is stacked, right? Because, nobody could act a compassionate version of Dr. Mengele, right?
no,
Oh, so yeah, but uh, a lot of actors like playing villains because it's juicy, right? It's a juicy role, and in that way it is. But but yeah, he does it credibly and effectively. Uh, what do you guys think of Laurence
Oh.
Olivier as an old Jewish man? Lieberman.
Brenda.
well,
Yeah,
I have I have a question about
yeah,
Gregory Peck playing Dr. Mengele.
yeah.
Did Doc did he resemble him? For some reason, when I think of Dr. Mengele, I think of someone with light hair and blue eyes. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
no,
totally
he
wrong.
didn't.
Look, here's
Yeah,
Mangala.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So he really did. Okay.
Yeah.
You can see there's a picture down there with the mustache that
Okay.
sort of
Thank you.
similar to the one that Peck wears in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
here's Pack.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right,
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So you know, he Gregory Peck is certainly more handsome. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Mengele, it's one of those peculiarities, right? That very few of the leaders of Nazi Germany resembled in any way the blonde, blue-eyed, Aryan that they were
Uh-huh.
talking about, right? So,
Yeah.
um, so I think, by the way, in terms of things that this movie was ahead of its time, I'm not sure when they started using colored contact lenses like
Uh-huh.
this movie uses. These bright blue eyes that
Yeah.
it's not just the clone who has them. He's been experimenting with eye color, with South American natives as well that you see in the movie here and there.
Right.
So I'm not sure how far back that goes, but they make pretty eerie and effective use of it here.
Yeah.
It goes back farther. I'm probably into the 60s, maybe even before, but it did stand out for me in the sense of how effective it was. So I think they probably used them in horror movies back all the way into maybe even to the 30s, some kind of contact lens. Um, So I was asking about the Ezra Lieberman character. Any thoughts about him? Yeah, Brenda?
Brenda.
I don't know. I think I don't know if I would have cast Laurence Olivier. I don't
Yeah.
think he was that believable as
I was just going to say the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, so it's funny. So we think Gregory Peck is believable as Dr.
Yeah.
Mengele, but
Yeah.
maybe Laurence Olivier less so as
Right.
Ezra Lieberman. I
Right.
will say the Oscar, the Oscar nomination went to Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
This movie, right? So at the time, I think people watching this movie respected that performance more than Gregory Peck's.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure I see it either. I mean, I'm just pointing it out, right?
Well, you wonder somehow what makes the Academy vote for certain actors. Oh, maybe it was Olivier's time. Maybe it was popularity. Who knows?
Yeah. So it was certainly different than other things Olivier had done over the
Yeah.
years, which I think sometimes gets noticed, right? In
Right.
the same way that although Gregory Peck was trying the same thing, I'll be the bad guy in this.
Uh,
But Olivier in his youth certainly was more often cast as the romantic lead, like Wuthering Heights and Rebecca and movies like that. And then even as he got older, I mean, he was the leading man of uh, serious films and things like when you see The Entertainer, which is earlier than this, but it's different, very different, right, than this role. So for Laurence Olivier to play sort of a non-assuming, less charismatic character, right, than he had played in so many other movies is again sort of casting against type. Nancy, you're on mute, I think.
Oh,
I got you. I unmuted
thank you. Thank you. I just read that Olivier was actually failing in health when he made this movie.
Oh,
Yeah,
And so I have a feeling it was also sometimes the Academy Awards people for getting old, although Olivier was in so many
Right.
wonderful things
Yeah.
that, that's it. But he did get an award, a special award from the Academy, I think that year for
yeah,
general stuff.
right.
Also in
That's-
Pride and Prejudice
that's
with Greer Garson.
Super
So many,
interesting.
yeah, he was in so many cool, wonderful pictures.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I still remember seeing his Henry the
Fifth.
Richard III
Richard III. Yeah.
on TV, but the movie scared the heck out of me when he's a horse, a kingdom for my horse, and it was really creepy. Anyway, enough.
Yeah. Right. He played Othello.
Yes, he was good at that. He was
Right.
wonderful.
Like this is not you would not cast a white actor as Othello anymore.
No.
So, um, so, uh, I'm, he lives for another 11 years after this movie
Mhm.
and continues to act. I mean, so he's in several things after this. So I think you're right. I mean, the people perceived his health as failing, but, he either got better or whatever. I mean, he managed to do several more memorable roles after this movie, in particular the one that we'll see for next week. Right? And um, see how we react to that one after we watch them. But but so the character he's playing here is it's a strong character. I mean, there's no actually. One of the most implausible parts of this movie is seeing Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier fighting in a living room after Olivier's been shot, and I mean that's like such just a Hollywood movie convention that it doesn't matter that I've been shot and go rolling around.
Multiple times he was shot.
Right. So I mean that's maybe more implausible than some of the other science fiction elements of the movie. But no denying that actually by the time that fight comes, it has the intended catharsis that we need, right? We need this fight, right? Um, and so it's easy to sort of look at it and laugh at it a little bit. To see two guys in their 70s fighting, rolling around on the carpet. But
Those
it's
had to be their stand-ins. Come on.
yeah, perhaps so. But I think I like him in some scene, Olivier in some scenes better than in others. I mean, I like him in the scene with Denholm Elliott where he calls in a favor. There's a kind of a shrewdness to his character that I like that comes across. I like him talking to his landlord early on.
Oh,
I
yeah.
find his sort of insistence on being sort of not working with these young Jewish Nazi hunters. I find that a little odd and a little off-putting about the character. But
Yeah.
perhaps it's one of those things that if you read Ira Levin's novel, maybe you get more of a sense of the damage that he feels as an aging Nazi hunter, maybe comes across more completely than it does here. So, so what else? Anybody notice anything else about it? So,
I do remember going to see it when it came out, and I I this is just not the type of movie that I would ever pick. And I wasn't dating Arthur then. So why did maybe I saw it later on TV. I don't know. Because this
yeah.
is not my type of movie whatsoever.
You think by 1978, did you know these guys were? I mean, go because of
Yes,
the
Gregory Peck. He's in To Kill a
not
Mockingbird and
the
Gentleman's
actors, not
Agreement.
the actors, the characters. That's based on Simon Wiesenthal.
Yes.
So,
My
so
father, who gave to a lot of charities, he gave a lot to Simon Wiesenthal.
right,
That could have been it.
yeah, and I can't really remember when I became aware of Wiesenthal and the work that Wiesenthal does, but it seems to me that when I saw this movie originally, I don't think I saw it in a movie theater, but
Yeah.
I don't really remember.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't.
uh, not long after it was in the movie theaters. I seem to remember seeing it. It may have been at a film society on campus at the University of Wisconsin, something like that. That I went to see it because I knew who Wiesenthal was,
Yeah.
uh, and was interested in seeing that. I don't know how much of Wiesenthal's actual life and character is really incorporated into this. There's a certain bitterness to Olivier's character that I'm not sure was a part of Wiesenthal, feeling forgotten and all that kind of stuff. Because if anything, I think his stature grew over time rather than feeling forgotten, but could be wrong. Julie?
In the early scenes with Wiesenthal or Lieberman, I thought it was a little, it just took away some credibility, I thought, with the landlord with the water actually dripping down. He had all of those papers and documents and everything, and that he's willing to be in a place where all of those things that were evidently important to him were going to be ruined by all that water dripping on them. But when the young boy called him with that information, and he wouldn't even listen to him. He was so rude and just putting him off, and it just seemed that somebody like Lieberman or Wiesen, if he's modeled by Wiesenthal, would have been at least interested to hear what he had to say and not be so rude to him, just
Yeah,
trying to shut him up and make him seem so insignificant. So it makes you even think from the very beginning that this man he's not respectable. I mean, you don't feel that. I mean, because he's based on Wiesenthal that he is a respectable man, but I don't think he was portrayed that way from the very beginning. That you should feel that he wasn't nice.
yeah, yeah. There's a little bit of a plot point that comes up, here and there in the movie about the importance of continuing to hunt these guys down by 1978. Is this something that we should still, and so the character that Lieberman is sort of what, you're an old man, why are you going after these other old men? Isn't it time to just forget about this, right? Um, and then there's a new generation of Nazi hunters coming along. I think the character's name is Barry that Steve Gutenberg plays, right, early in the movie.
And John Rubinstein,
Right, right. He's a part of that too. So, um, so if we want to be charitable about the character of Lieberman, it's that he tells him to go home. You know, the world is past this. We're done with this. Go home. Nobody cares about an old Nazi hunter anymore. Nobody really cares about old Nazis anymore. And in a sense, the movie makes the argument for why you have to hunt down old Nazis. because old Nazis are out there, cloning Hitler, right? And if they're not literally out there cloning Hitler, they're out there saying bad things like the Holocaust didn't happen, you know, um, and uh, making it okay. Mm. So in that sense, if you can point to anything, say in this movie that I said, here's a serious lesson from this movie, right? That's the serious point that the movie makes. Right? The serious point that the movie makes is you don't stop looking for Nazi war criminals just because they've gotten old. Right? No, so maybe we are past that now, because what are the chances that any of them are still alive somewhere at this point? Um, you know, but and the major players certainly, are gone. But I think if there's a serious point to be made here, it's that not following up on them, not looking for them is an issue. So we've got a last couple of comments here. I think um, I think Marilyn, you've got your hand up, and then Nancy, and then we'll call it a day.
Thank you. Well, I had trouble with my Amazon account, so I didn't get to actually view it, the film, but I was interested in just listening to everybody's comments. And it sounds to me, from what I heard, that this parallels very closely to last week's film about fear, not really fully knowing who somebody really is.
Yeah.
And that's something that we live with today in this world. And I did read a comment about Levin, and he said someday he'd like to meet a monster who really looks like a monster.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the comparison, and I think in addition to that idea about fear, I mean, you have this question that haunts the movie Munich. Should we be hunting these people down, right? You hunt this one down, you kill him, and somebody worse takes his place. Should we be doing that, right? What is the moral aspect of this? So I think this movie, it's a less serious piece of work. Got keep having to come back to that than Munich, but it's making the case that no, you hunt those people down, right? So I think that's interesting. So Nancy, you're still with us? Yeah. Somehow you moved in on my screen. We gotta get you unmuted. Here we.
Wants to keep muting. Okay. Just that recently there have been cases of elderly, very old people who were found to be involved with the Nazis who've gone on trial and been condemned, jailed for it. So it's not like there aren't people out there hunting them. But anyway, yeah, I thought Olivier's performance was. Never mind. I'm going to stop. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, great. We'll get to see him again next week. I'm interested in comparing those things. In part, I know I put this film on our schedule partly because I wanted you to see it in connection to the one we're watching next week. So
just remember, when Rabbi says next week, he means January 7th.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Otherwise, it would be Christmas Eve. Not then,
Great. So
and Erev Hanukkah.
You can get your account squared away and all that stuff and get a chance to see Marathon.
Yeah, it's Erev Hanukkah.
Babs, you were waving your hand.
Same thing.
That's what you wanted to know, is when the next one was? Okay, excellent. Great. So in that case, have a happy Hanukkah and a happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2025.
Yep. All right, be well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.